do Latinos face a different set of assumptions about daily life in this country when it comes to their civil rights?
Absolutely do, and it's for a very good reason. Our criminal justice system is not really designed to do what we purport it to do, which is to protect Americans and to help those that transgress the law to get right with the law and to reacclimate to American society. Instead, it's more of a politicized system where politicians are increasingly calling for getting tougher on crime and getting harder on crime, so it's more of a political dynamic that's going on. People vote for these folks, and then when they get in, they pass laws that aren't really designed to help keep people safe and to keep people and those folks who come into contact with the law to help them get right with the law again. What they're designed to do is to kind of take that retributive attitude towards folks. So what ends up happening is at every stage of the process, whether it's getting stopped or if you're stopped, getting charged with a crime, if you're getting charged with a crime, getting put in jail, if you're in jail, do you end up getting convicted? At every stage of the process, even after you're convicted and you're in jail, the length of time you spend there, Latinos and African Americans always spend more time, and they get longer sentences than any other population in the country, and that's because the system is politicized. And so, when you look at the fact that the United States incarcerates a higher percentage of its population than any other industrialized nation in the world, what you see is that we've got a system that's really designed to put people in jail, and it doesn't have much relation to keeping people safe, and especially doesn't have much to do with helping to rehabilitate folks and get them back into productive careers in American society. So if we wanted a system like that, we'd have to rethink and re-engineer the entire criminal justice system.
Tom Bowden, how do you come down on this?
Well, there's a couple of things I would say. One is if you look at crime, the studies I've seen on crime show that if you want to find the safest cities, look for the cities with the highest percentage of immigrant population. There's a direct correlation there. The more immigrant population, the safer the cities in general. The other thing I would say is that to the extent that this kind of discrimination is going on, and I don't know how prevalent it is, but to the extent it goes on, I think it's safe to say that the federal government sets a bad example on this, and they encourage this kind of discrimination by the quota laws, by the restrictions on immigration that put Latinos in a separate class that has to beg permission to be here, that has to beg permission to work. It calls them illegals, says on the one hand, you can't register for a Social Security card, you can't become legally in the tax system, but yet you blankety blank, how dare you come here and take benefits without paying taxes? So there's all these contradictions that go on. But the bottom line is that Latinos are placed in a separate category legally, and everybody, top to bottom in society, is encouraged to look at them differently legally, and I wouldn't be surprised if that carries over to policemen.
For people who aren't familiar with the Ayn Rand philosophy and your organization, is it fair to say that in general you're not a big fan of categorizing and defining people by ethnic and racial backgrounds?
Well, there's such a thing as racism, and racism is all over the place, including in the treatment of Latinos. Racism, I don't want to say racism is everywhere. Racism is in a lot of different places, and we are, anti-racism in the most fundamental way, in the sense that we're for the individual, and we would encourage Latinos to think of themselves as individuals in the sense that each individual immigrant or native or citizen or whatever is entitled to partake in the American dream, regardless of your race, your language, your background, and so forth. This is an individual right that you have that the government should protect. Now, citizenship is a different matter. There can be a lot of complexities, but citizen or not, you ought to be able to come in to this country without a quota, without permission. You can talk about screening at the border to keep out criminals, to keep out contagious diseases and enemies of the country, spies and so forth from countries that we're at war with or hostile to. But those are details. The fundamental is there should be free movement of people across the border. for people who, especially people who are coming here from Mexico, Latin American countries, to live the American dream, to work hard, to provide for their families, and to do the things that immigrant groups throughout American history have done. Yeah, we're all for the individual, and we're against looking at people as collectives.
So groups of people inside society that define themselves by language or national origin or the way they look or anything else.
Yeah, especially when it's an invidious kind of legal categorization. That's what's going on here. You know, Latinos are categorized separately legally. That's what we object to. Certainly there is such a thing as Latinos. I mean, it's not that you ignore the fact that people have things in common like language and race and so forth, but the question is, what do you do about that? What decisions do you base on that? And what we stand for is basing decision-making on the individual's character, the individual's actions, not on his relationship to a group. And this is where the conservatives go off the track, because they're so kind of anti-intellectual collectivist in the sense of these people don't look like us, they don't sound like us, they can't be real Americans. We have to kind of keep them away. And there's a whole lot of that racially tinged collectivism in the conservative movement that we distance ourselves from.
Beyond the criminal justice system, in education, in public accommodation, in housing markets, do we see a different daily life for American Latinos? Brent?
Absolutely. I mean, just look at education. The dropout rate for the Latino community is approaching 50%. And the schools that have been identified as dropout factories are overwhelmingly Latino and African American in this country. And it's no accident that those schools are, from top to bottom, much more inferior than the typical school in a white suburban area. And if you ever had a school like that in a white suburban area, they would be such a fuss and hue and cry about it that they'd fix it. And instead, you've got Latinos that are basically being failed by the system in our public education, and that's mortgaging our future. When you talk about, the debt crisis and everything else, they're important issues, but you're talking about the 25% of the U.S. population by the year 2030 now, and half of them are dropping out of high school. That's a huge problem, and this country hasn't faced it, and we're going to reap what we sow if we don't address this crisis.
But